Hello everyone. On behalf of Arogya World and Catalyst 2030, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all as we begin our much awaited session on climate and health as part of Catalyzing Change Week 2024. My name is Shabani Banerjee, and I am the Chief of Programs at Arogya World, and I'm going to be your host today. We'll be moderating this session. Before we dive into the session, let me begin with a few hard facts from WHO. According to the Lancet and WHO report, the climate crisis is the greatest public health threat facing humanity today. In fact, we face a climate, health, and ecological emergency. So, what are the major risks we are talking about? As we speak, the world is losing a football pitch of primary forest every 6 seconds. Citizens of wealthier nations are polluting 3 to 5 times the sustainable levels. Climate change in the form of heat waves, wildfires, floods, tropical storms are rapidly increasing in scale, frequency, and intensity, and we all can see that happening around us, right? 3.6 billion people live in areas that are susceptible to climate change. And as you can see in this pictorial representation from WHO, this is an overview of climate-sensitive health risks that can have an adverse impact on health outcomes like water, vector-borne diseases, NCDs, mental health, and the likes. It's expected to cause 250,000 additional deaths per year starting 2030. So how much is this damage going to cost us? The estimate says almost 2 to 4 billion US dollars per year. What is the implication for India? Areas with weak health infrastructure, mostly developing countries like India, will fail to cope without any assistance to prepare and respond. So having said that, we have just two ways to respond. Either we keep talking about it in forums and debating this whole issue and become victims of the catastrophe that's gaping at us, or else we walk the talk. And that's exactly why we are here today. So our session, as you can see the name, Igniting Action in Workplaces to Tackle Climate and Health, as the name suggests, is our endeavor to stimulate some action-packed ideas that each of us can take back to our organizations and genuinely catalyze change, right? On that note, I would like to start by inviting our esteemed guest, Clay Stranger, Managing Director, Rocky Mountain Institute, to begin the session with his pace-setting remarks. Clay is based in Colorado, US. So thank you, Clay, for joining in very morning, early hours, I know. And so let me not steal the thunder by telling that what you're going to talk about, because all that I can guarantee is that he will leave you speechless. So we are posting his profile in the chat box and you all can have a look. So a very warm welcome, Clay, and we are honored to have you here. The stage is all yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Shravani. I'm just going to pull up my screen and share a couple of slides. And I'll look for a signal from you that they're visible. Does this look okay?
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. You could make it a full slide if it's possible. Yeah.
Is it viewing as a full slide now?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Clay Stranger. I'm a managing director with Rocky Mountain Institute, where I co-lead both our transportation practice and also our India practice. And at RMI, at Rocky Mountain Institute, we focus on energy. We focus on clean energy deployment across geographies and across sectors. And so what I want to do this evening, just pretty quickly, is walk through where I see progress right now across the global energy system, then zoom in specifically on India and India's net zero goals, and then conclude with, I would say, 3 green shoots that I see as examples in India of extremely promising progress around the intersection of workplace well-being and climate. So for starters, as we look across the global energy and climate system right now, the global energy system is responsible for about 70% of heat trapping gases or global warming gases that are polluting the atmosphere. The other 30% comes from agriculture and forestry. But if we look at energy being 70% of the challenge, from our point of view, you can flip that on its head and also say, well, energy is actually 70% of the solution in that case as well. We see, it's a little bit difficult to know how to feel when waking up in the morning based on what you read. Like on the one hand, we see many negative tipping points drawing closer, and this chart on the left shows record temperatures year by year having only climbed over the last century. But the chart on the right also shows that we're actually seeing climate solutions and clean energy scaling way faster than any analysts thought possible. So those two things can seem a little bit in tension or in conflict. So let's unpack that a little bit. These are global figures here, and solar, wind, and batteries are just growing astonishingly quickly, faster than anyone thought possible. This is the compounded annual growth rate over the last 14 years. And you're seeing that wind generation is growing at 14%, solar at 28%, and batteries in particular, just in the last few years, ticked up to 52%, driven both by stationary storage to support renewables, but also by vehicle electrification. These are astonishing numbers. When you get growth rates at the level of 10% or higher, inevitably you start to see exponential change. And that's what you're seeing in the steepness of these curves. This is being underpinned and supported by the fact that the cost of renewable energy has, by every measure, collapsed. India's demand and incredible deployment of solar is one of the key drivers of the decline in solar costs, but we're seeing similar declines, 57% in offshore wind, 57% in onshore wind, 73% cost decline in offshore wind, 80% decline in solar energy and in batteries. And these declines are only over the past decade. What we are seeing as a result of these declines in the cost of renewable energy is that fossil fuel demand has either peaked or plateaued, depending on how you measure it. And there has been a major shift globally in the consensus of the outlook for fossil fuel demand over the past 5 years. So while some thought this was maybe a decade or more out, we're actually seeing that here 2019 may have been, it's too soon to tell, but whether or not we've peaked or plateaued is sort of irrelevant. The demand for fossil fuels globally has flattened out. And in some cases there's a little bit of variability introduced by things like instability in Chinese hydropower or in outages in French nuclear power that create potentially a little bit of an uptick. But by and large, the trend shows that we have peaked. This looks at where this change is taking place globally, and all regions around the world are showing at different speeds huge drops in the consumption of fossil energy and huge increases in the share of renewable technology. And despite all this progress that I've just described, we are still further away from a net zero, or another way of saying that is climate safe future, than we've ever been as humanity. And so this gets back to that tension that I'm describing, that unbelievable progress on the one hand, and yet further from the goal than we've ever been in this moment today, here in May 2024. So the final page I want to share on sort of global progress is that with key levers for reducing climate impact in place, one being energy efficiency and two being clean technologies, we actually have what we need to get where we need to go. What is the key variable here on whether or not we achieve the future that we know is a safe and resilient outcome for humanity and for the planet is the pace of change. Can we keep the pace of change across multiple dimensions where it needs to be? Okay, so that's a little bit on the my assessment of where things stand globally, and I would say there's both an equal dose here of optimism and of concern from our vantage point. So now I want to just zoom in globally and look at India in particular. And this chart it comes out of a colleague's study at the United Nations Environment Program. And I'm about to show two side-by-side charts, and I'll page back and forth to make the point. But this page, as you can see, the world looks a little bit distorted. Countries have been adjusted by their size to represent the cumulative amount of emissions that they are responsible for over the course of history. So this page shows cumulative emissions, historic emissions of greenhouse gases. Now page forward one, take a look at India and take a look at the United States here. This is who is responsible for the climate problem. And here you see who is most exposed to the climate problem. So I will page back one more time. Take a look at who has actually placed, which nations have placed these emissions into the atmosphere that have really caused the problem. And now take a look at who is the most exposed to the consequences of climate change. So as you can see, it's extremely uneven based on historic sources of emission and exposure. That said, India's emissions have increased quite rapidly of late, and that's being driven by rapid urbanization in the country. And when we look across various studies, by 2030, we see over 70 cities with 1 million plus inhabitants taking shape in India, 70% of GDP shifting to urban environments by 2030, and a doubling of the urban population between 2020 and 2030. This final statistic I find staggering and actually extremely, maybe one of the greatest sources of hope and opportunity as we look at India's climate landscape, and actually as we look at the work environment. 70% of the built environment, of the urban form, of the floor space that will support India's cities in 2030 is either yet to be built or currently under construction. So that represents a huge opportunity. That the scale of build out is unprecedented anywhere else in the world as we look around the opportunity to build right the first time. But zooming back to the challenge that I described a few minutes ago in terms of exposure to the consequences of climate change, this chart comes from colleagues at McKinsey, and the shading on the map represents the annual average probability of a lethal heat wave taking place. And on our current trajectory, by 2030, we could have major portions of northern India routinely experiencing heat waves that cross 35 Celsius wet bulb. And wet bulb is a measure of the combination of both heat and humidity. And 35 Celsius wet bulb is the threshold beyond which a human being cannot stay alive outdoors beyond a few hours. By 2050, there's an 80% chance of one of these events happening at least once a decade. And when you account for the fact that India has, I think, the world's largest outdoor labor workforce, exceeding 400 million individuals, this is a huge issue. But let's juxtapose that back to, to a source of hope in my mind. India has set extremely ambitious net zero energy targets. And just to characterize those quickly, by 2030, the country set a carbon emissions target of reducing 1 billion or 1 gigaton of carbon emissions equivalent. And by 2070, there's a target of achieving net zero across the entire economy. So what are the major circumstances looking specifically at India here? If you think about the urbanization and climate challenge in India, the reality that the urban population is expected to grow to 820 million people by 2051, that's just the situation. The the complication as I look at it, what's driving this is an increase in energy consumption, an increase in emissions, an increase in pollution, relative resource scarcity, which is true everywhere, and really the reality that infrastructure could become constrained or overloaded. But as we look at sort of so what's the unlock? How do we really address the current trajectory? The idea of being able to integrate distributed renewable energy across buildings and rooftops, using integrative design to really design whole systems buildings and workplaces and residences to reduce energy needs and while increasing and improving comfort. The emergence of efficient technologies. And I said earlier, the fact that 70% of India's urban form for 2030 is unbuilt or under construction today really comes at an amazingly concurrent moment if you look at the global cost decline of the most enabling technologies for climate safe and healthy buildings. Things like radiant cooling solutions, super efficient room air conditioners, super efficient building fans. The cost declines that we're seeing there and the commercialization of that super efficient technology is happening at a convergent moment with India's urbanization. So three brief examples I want to share, and then I will hand it back to you, Shravani, for our distinguished panel. There are really three examples that I want to point to that I think tie nicely to the theme of climate health and the workplace today. The first is a building that some colleagues from RMI were involved in designing. Some might be familiar with it. This is the Infosys headquarters building. And faced with the need for a growing office workforce, Infosys decided to construct a huge new campus with two separate wings. And what was interesting about this is it was really built as an experiment. And so the wing on the left right here was built under traditional design principles and construction. And the wing on the right here was built in a completely cutting edge and modern approach to office space. And the building on the right deployed things like that really actually ancient technologies deployed in India and elsewhere, including radiant cooling. And this is a method that draws heat from the room to the walls, cooled by water that circulates through embedded pipes. And this is an idea that's really like as old as civilization, and in many cases, caves with water running down the inside of the walls provided early humans with cool shelter. That was deployed here in this Infosys campus. The other key thing was daylighting. So if you take a look inside the building itself, notice there's no mechanical lights on in the building and very low glare. This is due to light shelves that actually bounce light off of the ceiling that distributes it evenly. And there are studies that show that daylighting in particular has huge benefits for workplace health, given the exposure to natural rather than artificial light. When you compare these two wings, the wing on the right saves 40% on energy costs compared to the alternative wing. And it also saw huge rises, 15% rise in productivity, 15% decrease in absenteeism, and surveys across the board showed that people found it a more pleasant and comfortable place to work. The next example is what I find one of the most exciting sort of greenfield examples in India, and this is Pallava city outside of Mumbai. And the site is already home to 160 inhabitants en route to what will be 1 million inhabitants. And what's most exciting about this example is that it's an example of integrative design, considering very, very carefully how work, leisure, and mobility can be integrated into a single development. And so the team at Loda, who's developed this project, have taken a comprehensive approach from selecting very efficient appliances to using window shading energy efficient glass, energy efficient cooling systems. And their goal is to actually realize a net zero development. So to realize India's 2070 goal by 2025. Pretty extraordinary when you think about pulling that target that far forward in time. And from the beginning, Palava was envisioned with this idea of abundant open green spaces. 25% of the city's footprint is dedicated to green space. And the urban form ensures that residents have everything from schools to retail to access to employment within a 15-minute walk. So there's strong encouragement of active mobility and mixed use development, promoting healthier lifestyle and by all measures reducing carbon footprints when basically everything from employment to education to entertainment is accessible within a 15-minute walk. So final example from my side here, sustainable commuting opportunities. I work a lot on mobility and transportation solutions, and the few that are arising around in India right now that I think are relevant to the theme today are around employee-sponsored electric mobility programs. So across India, particularly in Bangalore, we're seeing a rise in solutions where employers are actually willing and able to contract with electric mobility service providers to pick up employees on predetermined routes at their homes or at central locations and bring them to and from work. This allows, we're showing an uptick in productivity and a decrease in stress as a result of having a commute that is safe, predetermined, and predictable, but also reporting surveys that are reporting the ride to work in a zero emission vehicle that doesn't have the rumble of a combustion engine and that doesn't have any tailpipe emissions is a strong motivator and is actually showing higher retention signs from employers that are deploying this. Active mobility incentives, so incentives for bicycle or walk commuting where feasible and where there's protected infrastructure are also taking shape. And then lastly, for larger campuses, employers with larger campuses, particularly in the IT and education sectors, shared mobility options, be they electric bikes, passive bikes, and other options, dockable and dockless micro mobility solutions that are being provided by employers, encourage people to get outdoors, encourage people to exercise, and provide a safe, convenient, and free way to commute between locations. So that is what I wanted to share today. I appreciate everyone's attention, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here. Shravani, back over to you to take us through the rest of the event.
Thank you so much, Clay, and I'm sure that was brilliant and fantastic use cases that you presented, and the very innovative ideas on heating natural lights and micro mobility. Very, very fascinating, and a lot of us are used to sitting in offices, closed door offices, where we do not even know if it's raining outside, is it day or night, and but though we know that all the data says that the climate crisis threatens to undo the last 50 years of progress in development, global health, poverty reduction, etc., and will widen existing health inequalities. However, there seems to be a silver lining because a huge infrastructure development is on the way, and from all that you shared, there is tremendous opportunity for us to build the right way as workplaces adopt green solutions and contribute in our way towards climate and health. All right, so thanks a lot, and we just stay back. We'll come back to you for the Q&A section, Clay. In the end, those who have any questions for Clay can post your questions in the chat box, and we will come back towards the end of the session for the Q&A. All right, so we will move next to our panel discussion. A quick introduction to our esteemed panelists who are here. So we are honored to have here Neeraj Jain, Country Director, India, Director Growth Operations, Asia, Middle East, and Europe at PATH. We have Sangeeta Chandran, Head Safety and Wellbeing, Tara Consultancy Services, And we are honored to have Dr. Shabnam Singh, Principal Advisor Health Policy at CII. All their profiles are being posted in the chat box. In the interest of time, all of you can just click and have a look. And we will straight away dive into our, Q&A. So, as all of you know, that this is a joint session organized by Arogya World and Catalyst 2030. Arogya World is the recipient of prestigious UN Award, is a global health nonprofit organization. We are committed to prevention of NCDs through health education and lifestyle change. Catalyst 2030 was launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020 and is a fast growing global movement of social entrepreneurs, innovators, funders, and government actors working towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. And Catalyzing Change Week, as you know, it's world's largest event that's spanning more than 200 sessions of accelerated collaborative change learnings. And we are honored to be doing one of the sessions and to inspire actions across more than 250 healthy workplaces that we work with. So thank you everyone who've joined us today for this session, and I'm sure we'll have a power-packed discussion from the panelists. So I'm going to straight away dive into the questions. So my first question to you, Neeraj. Um, so Neeraj, Path has initiated a massive collaborative effort through the Sustainable Action for Climate and Health, such initiative funded by US Aid. And in fact, I felt honored and very proud to be up there on the stage taking a pledge on behalf of Arogya World. So would you like to tell us more about the initiative and how are you actually bringing different stakeholders together from the industry and from all kind of academic, etc., and inspiring this collaborative change, big collaborative change?
Thank you. Thanks, Shabani. And thank you for having me here. Thanks, Clay, for that very nice helicopter view of what's happening. I think very useful for us to realize that there is a lot going on, at the high level. I think, for us, firstly, we don't need to establish the connect between health, well-being, and climate anymore. I think that's been well established by the WHO, we were at COP at the Health Day, etc. What we are trying to do with such, which actually the full form is Sustainable Action for Climate and Health, is really to try to take a lot of those conversations into action. Because a lot of us, there's this whole policy dialogue that's going on. But how does that actually translate on the ground? What can I do? What can my organization do? How do we partner? That's the whole idea of such. And the idea is that we'll have to collaborate. The need is desperate. We all have to play our part. It's not just greening of energy. It's not just one or two things. I mean, the programs that Clay talked about are large, interventions. But I think all of us, even small organizations, need to do their part. So that's really what Such is all about. We've got about 60 partners now who are already on board. Such was just established about 4 or 5 months ago. And I remember you were there, Shamini, when we launched. There are about 60 partners, which includes development organizations, corporations, healthcare facilities, even government and funders, donors. So trying to bring them all together, try to build a collaborative platform so that we can see action on the ground. And the idea is really to build and promote resilient health systems, workplaces and communities. So it's not just health systems or workplace. It's a combination of all of that, because that is when we will see action on the ground. And this will only happen with the help of partnerships, is our sort of theory of change, if you want to call it that, since it's a very cool terminology nowadays. The interventions include city level climate action plans, which we are working with governments, climate health ecosystem at a national level, promoting youth awareness as well as action towards climate and health from the youth. And we've just launched a program this morning called with Youth Ki Awaaz, which is really to bring the youth in. Additionally, social behavior change. So a combination of all of this to try and see how we can bring more organizations on board to be able to do that. And we are finding a lot of traction. There's a lot of interest. It is not, you don't need a lot of money to make minor changes, and it is having very positive impact wherever those changes are happening. One of the areas that we're going to now be really working closely on is on supply chains, health supply chains, and try to see how we can reduce carbon footprints in those spaces. But I'm going to stop there. I know we've got less time, so I really want to hear from both Shabnam and Sangeeta to see what they have in mind. So I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Neeraj. And we're going to come back to you with the next question. But thank you for sharing the larger vision of how to make things happen on the ground and focus on actions rather than words. Going to you, Sangeeta. Okay, so you come with a lot of experience at TCS, a large organization doing a lot around healthcare and, of course, climate. So, picking up from where Clay Stranger left off, my question to you that what are the many concrete steps can be taken by companies to contribute to society's environmental goals, right, while fostering positive corporate citizenship? So, how is TCS contributing to these larger goals, and anything that you want to share with the audience that they can take away as a best practice learning?
Thank you so much, Shabni. And yes, I was listening to what Clay was saying, and I looked at the example which he gave us about emphasis. And, I was thinking about some of the beautiful buildings that we have at TCS as well, which are really path breaking in terms of the way we look at, looking at sustainability. And with a very brief disclaimer that I'm not the expert on sustainability within our group, and I'm a well-being expert. But when we were talking about this, and I talked to our HSE, head of HSE, and we were talking about the various things. I have to tell you that when I looked at our own reports and looked at what we are doing internally, it's really, really something which is fantastic. And just very briefly to take you through, one is that again referring back to what Clay said about net zero. And one thing at TCS is that TCS is committed to reaching net zero by 2030. And in fact, I think we are ahead of all the targets that we've set for ourselves till now. And we are galloping towards that goal. And there are many, many different things, of course, that we are doing around that, whether it is managing our carbon emissions, with the green infrastructure and operational efficiency. All our new campuses are designed according to green building standards for energy and resource efficiency. They have rooftop solar installations. We have 36 offices, where we are certified green buildings across the globe. So there's a lot of all that is going on. In addition, of course, while we focus on our buildings, we have green IT. So our initiatives, on our data centers, our IT device consolidation, all that is also completely focused on reducing the carbon footprint. And at the same time, we are also working with many, many organizations on how do we create more and more green IT projects for them as well. Renewable energy, of course, that is something that is being looked at very strongly. And across our campuses, whether it is in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Chennai, where we have really huge campuses. And I must really tell you that if anyone has not been to our Chennai office, the Sirusri office is really, really a showcase and really something wonderful to go and see. So if anyone is interested, please let us know, and we will see if that is possible for you to do. And while we do that, obviously we have so many people. We have more than, TCS is like a small country. We have more than 6 lakh people. And because of that, the number of people that we have means that, and of course, most of these people are indoors. And so we have to think about our water management, our waste management. And these are again things which are projects which are put in place many, many years ago. And the kind of water harvesting, the also groundwater replenishment initiatives on the campuses, rainwater harvesting. So all these are done. And for waste management, we have a very strong, and I don't know, some of you might have at some point seen this picture of a canteen, where we talked about food waste and how much, we were counting the food waste. It happened to be a TCS office. And it really did the rounds. And that is really the philosophy, to bring down the waste in terms of food as well. And we also have employee engagement to ensure, because the number of people that we have, the ripple effect of people being people being sensitized, people understanding the importance of sustainability, something that is again a huge focus. In fact, the Tata Sustainability Month is coming up in June, and huge amount of different kinds of programs, starting with little children of Tata Group families to associates to leadership. There are discussions which will, ensure that everybody at Tata and at TCS is really focused on keeping this in at the center. We realize all this because we also see how climate change is impacting people. And while it might not impact people who work at TCS directly in the sense of they're not outside, and as Clay was saying, they're not exposed to maybe the heat wave which is happening directly and not going to have to do that. But there's so many different things which we can talk about later, which does impact our people, does impact the business. So climate change is definitely something that we look now more and more in conjunction with every different aspect of the business, including health and well-being.
Absolutely,
That,
Sangeeta. That's really, really inspiring to know. And I'm going to straight head to Dr. Shabnam. So, Dr. Shabnam, you bring in more than 40 years of rich healthcare experience and being the principal advisor on this health policy at CII and a founder board member of Healthcare Sector Skills Council and Life Sciences. My question to you is, how do you think we can inspire change in policymakers, funders, business leaders to empower social innovators and communities to effect change?
So my compliments to you at Arogya World and Catalyst, and to Clay for an absolutely outstanding overview of the challenge as well as what can be done for solutions. So to your question, what we have found over the years is that at the end of the day, if you have data and you have incentivization, speak to each other and work parallelly, you have a very, very sound pathway to success. And in our country, we have found the biggest influencers of change are children. And there's a reason behind it. Because we have 70% of our population is in rural India, the dependence of parents, especially in this today's world of digitization of the entire family, towards leaning towards the youngsters who are digital natives to solving their problems, makes them a very, very powerful influencer of change, right? And to that avail, we have leveraged this hugely in healthcare, where we have trained children in healthy behavior as well as giving them an insight into the world of healthcare, of employability, as well as changing. The concept being that if you train one child in healthy behavior, you influence a whole family. That's point number one. Point number two is identifying who are the peers or influencers in society. So in our context, what we have found, working with the panchayat, and CII works very, very closely with the panchayat to influence change at the community level. And we saw it beautifully demonstrated in COVID, where they were able to contain the spread in rural areas. And the other place is the employer. So CII, since it has 10,000 plus all the large industries and about 2 to 3 lakhs of mid and small medium enterprises, we find that influencing this level of stakeholder in turn has a ripple waterfall effect across the system. I'll give you a little bit of an insight, and I'll just take 2 minutes, and forgive me if I just read it out because I don't want to lose sharing this information. So way back 15 or 20 years ago in CII, we started the CII Sorabji Godrej Green Business Center. Right? And this brought in the concept of the Indian Green Building Council. So we started this momentum 15 or 20 years ago. We have, to incentivize people, we have a Green Pro certification, a Green Co certification, as well as we work along with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And how do we incentivize them is that at the annual CII award ceremony, we have an award for excellence in energy management. And it is not of today. It has been there for the last 15 years, right? So gradually this trickles down. And as I said, if you share it with the 10,000, the subcontractors who are associated with the company, you can influence change through them to a larger ecosystem. Then we have a CRI ITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development. And this is a platform for promoting sustainable development by empowering companies. So we teach them what has to be done through capacity building, training, as well as audits, so that they can come up the value chain. Also, technology innovation support is given by CII. We have a foundation, and in that foundation, the climate change resilience initiatives, cleaner air, better life, a crop residual management initiative has been started in Punjab and Haryana. As you recall, whenever we come into winter, we have a huge issue in the city of Delhi. So this residue management is something that has been taken on by CII to work with the farmers in that area, right? So at the end of the day, it's a combination of working with the government, putting forth the problems of the industry to be able to adopt it, as well as incentivize them and support companies as well as innovators and give them awards to keep this momentum going. So back to you. I'll stop here, otherwise we're running short of time.
Sure. That is really overwhelming, and to know that so much is happening, and CII is playing such a huge role. And coming back to you, Neeraj, a little different question I'm going to ask you, and we just have 15 minutes. So I'm going to move a little fast. So according to Forbes, the most impactful way to make a difference on the climate crisis is to expand your work outside your own corporate. So for example, Apple launched a supplier clean energy program that now has hundreds of vendors committed to using 100% renewable energy, right, for all Apple manufacturing. So that's quite a giant ripple of change. So how do you think organizations, like, most of our audience, and we have so many 250 plus healthy workplaces who we want to take this, we are recording this session to them. So what is it that, organizations you think can do to influence and power to drive change externally across their larger ecosystem?
Thanks, Rabni, and I'll take literally like a couple of minutes. Firstly, I forgot to acknowledge I'm also a board member on Arogya, and I'm very proud of that and your healthy workplace program.
Absolutely.
So really proud of that. I think just to your question, it's got to be an ecosystem approach. If a Tata company, for example, says we want to make sure that we are climate sensitive in our workplace, around our workplace, with our workers, maybe even the supply chain, for example, I alluded to. You've got 600,000 people, TCS, Sangeeta just told us. That's as big as Bhutan. That's 6 lakh people. So you could actually change a lot. We just need that commitment. It does cost. So I think costs are important. And that's where it's important to actually look at the ecosystem together and collaboration. But it's got to be an ecosystem approach. It cannot be just me and my office. The lights and all of that is great, but how do we bring the entire ecosystem together is going to be the challenge, and that's what we have to really strive to do. Supply chain is going to be critical. 70% of all health related stuff is in the supply chain. So if we can reduce that, that would make a big change. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. And couldn't agree with you more, Neeraj. And thank you for that. So coming to you quickly, Sangeeta, and one more to Shabnam, and we'll open it to the audience. And in the interim, you can post your questions in the chat box, or else if you want to share some of your experience, we will allow you some time you can raise your hand and share your experience, your ideas, your suggestions. We are open to that. So before that, going to you, Sangeeta, my question to you is that how can large organizations with pan-India presence like yours help local citizens to have more power to advance climate and health in their own families and their own communities?
So, Shravani, absolutely, this is something that we think about a lot because we really do understand that, when we have employees, and 6 lakh employees means 6 into, say, minimum 4, right, which is their own families, and then by extension further and further more into their communities as well. So whenever we're thinking about this, and we do believe very strongly in, one part, of course, is the organization itself and what we are doing, and there's a lot that we are doing, but we believe that our own people can be, change agents. And for that, we have a lot of activities that we do to bring about a lot of awareness and action. So for well-being, we have, different areas of well-being, and of course purpose comes in as a very strong motivator to help people to be well. And there's a there's a dual purpose for that, because it's not just about helping yourself to feel good, but also helping the community. Just taking up from what Dr. Shabnam was saying about children, recently, so we are going to have because it's holiday time, and we'll have children camps in our offices. And we're talking about how do we help our children to make better decisions around their food, how do we help them to make better decisions around their environment, how can our children in urban settings appreciate biodiversity, and understand that human first is not the only way to live, because as she said, and I agree 100%, that our children really are our strongest and the influencers of the future, right? So that is something which we really think a lot about and take forward. The other thing that we do is that we have competitions internally to help teams come up with challenges around sustainability and about around well-being as well. And we realize that our people get impacted with so many different things. And one of the big things is whether it is a flood in Chennai, which of course happened last year, and the kind of response which had to happen to take care of our own people and people around us and things like that, how it impacts our BCP, which is obviously crisis management becomes a huge problem. Whether it's a heat wave, and I don't think there's a bigger reminder of what climate can do to all of us than the current heat wave that we are all having, right? So these are things which impact our people directly, and they absolutely understand. And the conversations are constantly ongoing about how can we help mitigate this, not just as large organizations, which the organization does as already, as I spoke about, but as individuals who can actually become uh, path breakers, as jugnus in this, and make this happen. And if you have say in Mumbai, we have about more than 50,000 people. From that 50,000 people, if we have like about 5,000 people who really are passionate about that, we use them as influencers, we use them as champions to actually drive these changes. So these are just small things which we do, but I think it's really important to think about it, because health and well-being and sustainability, and these are things, and I think we've all come to understand these things slowly over a period of time. So while we looked at each of these things as silos some years ago, we now know that these are all part of the same discussion, and we need to discuss that. So that is something which we are very strongly aware of, and there are lots of different things that we do at TCS to influence that. I
Fantastic,
will stop
fantastic.
here. There's lots more that you want to cover.
Yes, yes, thank you for that. And I think that's really insightful. And I can see Neeraj saying that yes, action needs more push and incentivization. So my question coming from incentivization to you, Dr. Shabnam, that is there a need to relook at economic incentives and disincentives to companies to see if they are essentially working for or rather against the planet and the people?
See, fundamentally, what we have noticed, and it's a strong belief, nobody will want to kill the golden goose, and that's their workplace, right? Nobody will. So, as far as that is concerned, you have to demonstrate to them the evidence, which earlier we didn't have. Now we have studies out of IIM Ahmedabad, which says that if you invest 1 rupee in social change, you will get 5 rupees back. And as Sangeeta said, the heat wave, the rains in the hills, These are all self-evident impact of not looking after the world, right? So that level is already there that I need to do something. What is required is hand-holding them in their individual areas to show them the way that you can have cost efficiency and operational efficiencies to be better at what you're doing, and thereby what we call munafa, your productivity, your return on investment. It's much better to do that way. And when you come closer to home and you say tomorrow your food is going to become expensive, then you touch a chord in the person. Otherwise, these incentives have a shelf life, right? Which then, if it is not able to be sustainable, people do not believe you in the long-term process. You know, it's short-term. You've got to have money in your pocket to be able to sustain that incentive. So it is as Neeraj very rightly pointed out, it has to be a concerted, multi-stakeholder, multi-ecosystems that are there to work together to be able to have it. But gradually it is seeping in. And messaging, of course, is extremely important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shabnam. And we're going to quickly go to the audience question. So here is a question for you, Clay, from Zorika. Okay, so Zorika says that I'm interested to know what are the main challenges in addressing the intersection of urbanization and climate change in India, and what are the main lessons that can be learned and applied to other countries and communities? You want to quickly take that?
Sure. I put something in the chat in response, but I'll just say in brief that as you think about urbanization, implicit in that is the build out of new infrastructure, new systems, new buildings. And if we can center the human being as the focal point of the design for these for the new infrastructure, as opposed to say a vehicle or other sort of design focuses that can result in really beneficial things. And I put this in the chat, but 26% of the land area in the cities in the United States is reserved for parking. That's for the parking of mostly privately owned vehicles, which have about a 4% utilization rate. That means they're idle 96% of the time. That is not a system that is optimized for human beings or for nature. And so that's one that I would put forward, is how can you minimize the use of land, infrastructure, and resources for vehicles and optimize the use of land and infrastructure for human beings and nature.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Anda Kumar says that, he's sharing one great practice. So he says that when Neeraj addresses on the sustainability and supply chain, just wanted to share my thoughts on 5 Rs. So he's talking about recycle, reduce, reuse, redesign, and reimagine. The future is circular economy. That's a fantastic takeaway, Nanda. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll take one more question is from Praful. Any thoughts on Government of India Mission Life Lifestyle for Environment, which outline 75 action points for individual action? Neeraj or Shabnam, you want to take that?
Yeah, it's a great program. And if you see on their app, which is there, it's a child. That's what I've written in the chat. The figure is of a child holding a baton and saying, okay, now do this, guys, right? Now, this is a fantastic initiative, but it needs brand ambassadors. How many people know about it, right? And how many people will go through the 75? So that's exactly what I'm saying. Messaging and how you do that messaging, right? I mean, Sangeeta would have seen it, that Tata Power ad, which is 4 minutes long, 4 point something, of saving the earth. It doesn't have a single, no voice at all. But it is so powerful that you immediately absorb the essence of it. So we need to start working like that to get the message out there. So it transcends languages, it's visual. You can even make it shorter because today attention span is so limited, mind space is limited. So if we do that, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shabnam. And just we have now 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask one rapid fire question to all of you, and you will have just 30 seconds to respond to that. Yes, I'm wearing the hat of Karan Johar. And Clay, you will not know who he is, but he's probably the icon of rapid fire. I'll tell you offline. But here we go on the question. Anu, you can just share the slide that has all the speakers. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. It's important to measure what matters. So, what are your views on moving from GDP to well-being to measure a nation's progress? You want to start, Clay, quickly, and then all of you can go next one by one?
Sure. My thoughts on that are that it's an important addition, and that GDP alone can be an extractive and a counterproductive measure. So I might just add to well-being. If we could evaluate countries based on their GDP, their well-being quotient, and their ecological health, I think those three together would present a more balanced picture. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Quickly, Sangeeta and Neeraj, Dr. Shabnam.
I
Yeah,
endorse
so
what it said. Sorry.
I absolutely agree. And, I was just reading this article about this by the HBR, and it says that the GDP is a measure of economic well-being and not human well-being. And I think that is something which is really important to think about. And how do we start to look at different factors that actually impact human beings other than economy, and well-being, of course, being one of them very, very strongly. And taking from that, I think, very quickly, if you look at the current elections and if you look at the various points that people are using to contest the elections, nowhere are we talking about sustainability, nowhere are we talking about the environment and how it impacts people. And, that is something which is telling us how far we are in terms of, viewing GDP as something that measures human richness, human happiness, and well-being. So I think absolutely there's a need to include well-being in GDP.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And any other comments do we have from
Yeah,
you?
maybe I'll just come in quickly. I think, I think the well-being is actually a means to a good end of GDP. So, I think well-being is important if we want to increase the GDP. I also have a big problem. I'm an economist and by training, but I have a huge issue with GDP because it completely forgets about equity. And, in a country like ours, equity is the most important thing. GDP is a little bit of it's limiting. So I would say that. I'm going to stop there.
All right, so thank you very much. And with that note, we are going to conclude the session today. And what a power-packed session this has been, with such fascinating ideas and takeaways for each of us to catalyze change and ignite actions at our workplaces. And, everybody, this is just the beginning of the discussions that we are having. And at Arogya World, we are committed to inspire change while we are working with more than 250 companies spanning 7 million employees. And the numbers are multiplying as we speak. We are a knowledge partner to CII. We have taken a pledge at the, Path US-led such initiative to impact climate and health. We are making the citizens of Bangalore healthy through our pioneering Bangalore Arogya City program. And we will also pick up this conversation again during our annual Healthy Workplace Conference coming in December. And next year, we're going to make a pledge at the Clinton Global Initiative to join the Global Changemaking Network. So stay tuned with us. And I'm going to really, really express my sincere gratitude to all the panelists, Clay, Neeraj, Sangeeta, Dr. Shabnam, for joining us and making this a fantastic session with a lot of takeaways. And this really, really means a lot. So we're going to summarize all the points and send across to all of you. We have recorded the session. We'll also share the recording and a lot of other chats interesting ideas we have in the chats. We're going to collate everything and send it to you. So thank you, Jeru and the Catalyst 2030 team for giving us this opportunity to host this session. Thank you, Roykun, Manikanta, Anu, Kriti, Nandan, Naveen, Usha, the entire team here, all of you for all of your support. And I would also like to thank our CEO, Nalini Saligram. I don't know if she could join the call today, who's been a passionate advocate of climate and health, and this session has been her brainchild.